It's a fantastic piece, and it deals with real people and real emotions. It's not gods and goddesses, and so we hope the audiences will find something to identify with, because it's a very, although the people in it are royalty, it's a very domestic story. It's a story about family and the breakup of a family and the getting together eventually of that family. So I think there's something that audiences can empathise with in the characters, so we hope that'll be a draw. Well, we decided to do this with harpsichord basically because the harpsichord is a Baroque instrument, the piano isn't. And then we thought it would be nice to add a violin and a cello, because that's a very Baroque combination. And quite a lot of the arias were written just with a violin line and a cello line and a harpsichord in the middle. So we can keep those much as Handel wrote them, but just with single players rather than several. My main job was to work out what the harpsichord is going to do. Some of the time it fills in what the other string instruments in the orchestra would do, and other times it plays what's known as a continuo part, which is a system that Handel had of indicating, just by writing a bass line with figures below it, what the harmonies were, and that was left to the individual player to realize. And you can do this in any number of ways, very simply or very ornately, depending on what the music wants to do. For instance, if I can just illustrate with this one aria, this is a well-known aria from the piece, and Handel left it just with a melody and a bass line. That's rather bare. So what the harpsichord does, the cello plays the bass line, the singer sings the tune, and the harpsichord fills it in the middle like this. If it had been a slightly more dramatic aria, the harpsichord could have played something like this. So there are all sorts of ways of doing it. Part of my job is to try and rein all that in and try and make it appropriate for each individual aria. I mean, I could have just left it blank and asked Susie Wapshott, who's playing, to do it herself, but that seems rather unfair. The countertenor voice is the nearest we have to the castrato voices that were used in Handel's time, and they were the real equivalent of the 18th, 19th century prima donna. They were the people who ruled the opera world, and the composers, in a sense, were their servants, because they could demand how many arias they had and all that sort of thing, what they did. And so it's to give a flavour of that sort of sound. They were written for theatres in London, but the theatres in those days were quite small and intimate. So in a sense, taking a piece like Rodelinda round smaller venues in Scotland is not that far removed from the sort of venues that it would have been performed in originally. We tend to think of operas being very grand and for big theatres, but this wasn't. This was quite intimate. And I think that's why Handel was able to take quite an intimate story and use it as the basis for this piece.